The thing about being the only human at the Galactic Defense Academy was that everyone expected you to die horribly within the first week. Dante had made it 3 months now, which apparently constituted some kind of miraculous survival record that had the betting pools in complete chaos. "Again!" Commander Axon's voice boomed across the training deck, his crystalline throat producing sounds that could probably shatter glass if he really tried. "Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from." The silicon-based instructor stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a body that looked like someone had carved a bodybuilder out of living gemstone and given him an attitude problem. "You pathetic larvae, think you can defend the galaxy by cowering behind energy shields?" Dante wiped sweat from his forehead, trying not to wince as his muscles screamed in protest. The gravity generators were set to standard galactic normal, which was roughly twice Earth's pull, and every movement felt like he was dragging himself through thick mud. Around him, his fellow cadets were handling the increased gravity with varying degrees of success. Blix, the insectoid from the Hive worlds, chittered nervously as she adjusted her grip on the plasma rifle. Her compound eyes reflected the harsh training lights in 1,000 different directions, and her 4 arms gave her a significant advantage in weapon handling, though she had a tendency to freeze up when things got intense. "Human!" Novan hissed, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been amusement or disgust. It was hard to tell with his species. "Why do you even bother? Your bones are soft calcium, your skin tears like wet paper, and you can barely lift standard equipment." The draconian warrior was built like a scaled tank, all muscle and attitude, with teeth that could probably bite through hull plating. His people had conquered half their star system before they'd even invented spaceflight, and they never let anyone forget it. Dante shrugged, chambering another round into his weapon. "Maybe I just like proving people wrong." "Proving people wrong by dying spectacularly is still dying," Fex observed, their crystalline body refracting the light into prismatic patterns. The energy being's voice resonated from somewhere inside their translucent form, creating harmonic overtones that made conversation feel like listening to a living tuning fork. "Though I admit, your species' capacity for self-destruction is statistically fascinating." Wolf, the pack hunter from the Fenris colonies, let out a sound somewhere between a growl and a laugh. His canine features were pulled back in what his species considered a grin, though it showed entirely too many sharp teeth to be comforting. "The human smells of determination and stupidity, mostly stupidity." "Thank you all for the overwhelming vote of confidence," Dante muttered, raising his rifle as the next simulation began. The training deck transformed around them, holographic projectors creating a perfect replica of the siege of Proxima Station. Enemy contacts materialized in flashes of red light. Void stalkers, the nightmare fuel of every cadet's sleep cycles. 10 feet tall, covered in adaptive armor that shifted to match their surroundings, with claws that could cut through battleship hull like butter. Most species had encountered the stalkers exactly once in their evolutionary history. Those that survived the encounter spent the next 1,000 years building bigger guns and thicker bunkers. "Remember," Commander Axon's voice crackled through their comm units, "these creatures hunt by fear. They can sense panic, taste terror, feed on desperation, control your emotions, or they will control you." Easy for him to say. His people didn't have adrenaline glands. The first stalker materialized behind a pile of debris, its form shifting and wavering like heat mirage. Blix immediately opened fire, her plasma bolts lighting up the training deck in brilliant blue flashes. The stalker absorbed the first few hits, its armor adapting and dispersing the energy, then leaped with impossible grace. Novan roared a battle cry and charged, because apparently 3 million years of evolution hadn't taught his people the concept of tactical thinking. His plasma cannon fired in full automatic mode, turning the air into a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't trying to kill them. Vex took a more measured approach, their energy form pulsing as they calculated trajectory and firing solutions with mathematical precision. Each shot was perfectly placed, each movement economical and efficient. Wolf circled around the flanks, using pack tactics that had served his people well on 100 battlefields. His rifle barked in short, controlled bursts, while he maneuvered for better position. And Dante? Dante did what humans did best. He improvised. While his teammates engaged the primary threat, he noticed something the others had missed. The simulation wasn't just about killing the stalkers. It was about protecting the civilian evacuation route that ran through the station's main corridor. The enemy AI had positioned snipers along the upper catwalks, ready to cut down fleeing non-combatants. Without thinking, Dante broke from formation and sprinted toward the maintenance shafts. His human flexibility let him squeeze through spaces that would have stopped the larger aliens. And his endurance, the one physical trait where humans actually excelled, carried him up 3 levels while his teammates were still engaged below. He emerged behind the sniper positions just as the holographic civilians began their evacuation. The enemy constructs were focused downward, tracking potential targets with mechanical precision. Dante's first shot took out the power relay for the catwalk's artificial gravity. The sudden shift sent 2 stalkers tumbling into the void below, their adaptive armor useless against a 10-story fall. His second shot overloaded the environmental controls, flooding the upper levels with emergency foam that solidified on contact. The remaining snipers found themselves trapped in rapidly hardening polymer, effectively neutralized without firing a single shot. "Simulation complete," the computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. "Civilian casualties, 0. Cadet casualties, 0. Mission parameters, exceeded." Commander Axon's crystalline features arranged themselves into what might have been surprise. In 3 months of training, no squad had managed a 0 casualty run on the Proxima simulation. "How?" Novan demanded, his reptilian pride clearly stung. "The human barely fired his weapon." "Because he thought," Vex observed, their harmonic voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect. "While we focused on the immediate threat, he analyzed the broader tactical situation." Blix chittered rapidly, which was her species' equivalent of nervous laughter. "The soft mammal outmaneuvered us with environmental manipulation. My queen mother would molt with shame." Wolf's ears twitched as he processed the human's scent again. "Not stupidity," he corrected his earlier assessment. "Something else. Something unexpected." Commander Axon studied Dante with compound eyes that had seen 1,000 battles across 50 star systems. "Cadet Dante, report to my office after evening meal. We need to discuss your unconventional approaches." As the training deck powered down and the holographic enemies faded away, Dante found himself wondering if being the only human at the academy was going to be more complicated than he'd originally thought. The way his teammates were looking at him now, like he was a puzzle they couldn't quite solve, suggested that maybe being underestimated had been the easy part. Tomorrow's field exercise was supposed to be a routine visit to the Academy's exotic animal preserve, a chance to study alien fauna in controlled conditions, learn about the diverse ecosystems that made up the galactic community. What could possibly go wrong? The Prometheus III Exotic Preserve was supposed to be the safest place on the station. 3 layers of containment fields, automated defense systems, and enough redundant security protocols to make a paranoid AI weep with joy. Which was why, naturally, everything went catastrophically wrong the moment Dante and his squad set foot inside. "Welcome to the jewel of our research division," Dr. Vex announced with the kind of pride that usually preceded spectacular disasters. The Altarian physician was tall and graceful, with skin that shifted through subtle color patterns when she was excited about something. Right now, she was practically glowing with enthusiasm. "Here we study over 2,000 species from across the known galaxy, each in carefully controlled habitat simulations." The preserve stretched out before them like an alien Garden of Eden, if Eden had been designed by someone with a serious predator fetish. Massive dome structures housed everything from the crystal forests of Sirius Prime to the methane swamps of the Outer Rim. Walking paths wound between the habitats, protected by shimmering energy barriers that kept the tourists safe from the exhibits. "Remind me again why we need to know about alien wildlife," Novan grumbled, his reptilian features scrunched in distaste. "My people conquered our homeworld by killing everything that looked at us sideways." "Because," Dr. Vex replied with strained patience, "understanding ecosystems is crucial for planetary defense. You can't protect what you don't understand." Blix chittered nervously as something large splashed in the aquatic dome to their left. "My hive sisters would say this place reeks of predator musk. Too many apex species in one location disrupts the natural order." "Your hive sisters sound like they have excellent survival instincts," Vex observed, their crystalline form refracting the artificial sunlight into rainbow patterns. "The concentration of lethal organisms here is statistically improbable in nature." Wolf's ears were constantly swiveling, tracking dozens of scents and sounds that his pack-hunting instincts catalogued as threats. "This place makes my teeth itch. Too many hunters. Not enough territory." Dante found himself oddly fascinated by the whole setup. On Earth, zoos were places where children pressed sticky fingers against glass and cooed at sleeping pandas. This felt more like a collection of nightmares with really good lighting. They paused in front of a massive dome labeled Ondorian Habitat. Extreme caution required. Inside, artificial trees stretched toward a false sky, their silver bark gleaming like metal. The undergrowth was dense enough to hide an army, which was probably the point. "Ah, the crown jewel of our collection," Dr. Vex said, her skin cycling through excited purples and golds. "The Ondorian stalker cat, apex predator of the Veil Nebula systems. Adult specimens can reach 300 pounds, with retractable claws capable of punching through battle armor and psychic hunting abilities that make them nearly impossible to evade." "Psychic hunting?" Dante asked, because apparently his survival instincts had taken a coffee break. "They can sense fear, track emotional signatures, even project terror into their prey's minds to trigger panic responses," Dr. Vex explained cheerfully. "Absolutely fascinating creatures. The Ondorians worship them as living gods." "And you keep them here because?" Vex inquired with what sounded like genuine curiosity mixed with mathematical horror. "Research, of course. We're on the verge of understanding how their psychic abilities function. The applications for military psychology could be—" That was when the alarms started screaming. Red lights bathed the preserve in hellish illumination as automated voices began announcing things that nobody wanted to hear. Containment breach in sectors 5 through 12. Emergency protocols. Initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." "That's impossible," Dr. Vex stammered, her skin cycling through alarmed oranges and panicked yellows. "The system has 17 layers of redundancy. Nothing could—" A sound echoed through the preserve that made every cadet's blood freeze. It started as a low rumble, like distant thunder, then rose to a hunting call that bypassed rational thought and spoke directly to the prey animal hindbrain that lived in every sentient species. "Stalker cats," Wolf breathed, his pack hunter instincts recognizing the sound even as his conscious mind rejected what he was hearing. Adult stalker cats, hunting. Through the failing energy barriers, shapes began to move. Large shapes, fluid shapes, shapes that seemed to bend light around them as they padded through the artificial jungle with predatory grace. Blix made a sound like a broken violin and immediately tried to climb the nearest wall. Her insectoid biology was screaming at her to find a hole and hide until the terrible sounds went away. Novan's warrior pride lasted exactly 3 seconds after the first stalker emerged from the undergrowth. The creature was everything the doctor had promised and more. Sleek muscle wrapped in midnight black fur, with eyes that glowed like amber stars, and claws that extended with tiny snick sounds that somehow carried perfectly across the preserve. When it looked directly at the draconian warrior, Novan took an involuntary step backward. "We need to leave," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "We need to leave now." More shapes moved in the habitat. Not just adults, smaller forms that bounded and played among the silver trees with the casual grace of creatures born to hunt and kill. "Cubs," Dr. Vex whispered, her skin now a solid alarmed white. "They have cubs. If the adults think we're threatening their young—" She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened to species that threatened stalker cat cubs. There was usually very little left to identify afterward. The security barriers flickered and died with a sound like breaking glass. Nothing stood between the cadets and several 100 pounds of psychic apex predator except empty air and rapidly failing courage. "Back away slowly." Commander Axon's voice crackled through their comm units. He was responding to the emergency, but even at full sprint, he was still 5 minutes out. "Do not run! Do not make eye contact! Do not show fear!" "Do not show fear?" Blix chittered hysterically. "They're psychic. They can taste fear." The largest stalker cat stepped fully into view, and Dante understood why the Ondorians worshipped these creatures. It moved like liquid shadow given form, each step perfectly balanced, each movement flowing into the next with predatory perfection. Its amber eyes swept across the group of cadets with the kind of intelligence that suggested it was evaluating them not just as threats, but as potential meals. Behind it, smaller shapes emerged. The cubs were perhaps a third the size of their parent, but they moved with the same fluid grace, the same predatory awareness. One of them, barely the size of a large earth dog but infinitely more dangerous, separated from the group and began padding directly toward the cadets. "Nobody move!" Novan hissed, his reptilian warrior instincts warring with his survival programming. "Nobody even breathe!" The cub continued its approach, amber eyes fixed on something that had caught its attention. Its psychic abilities were already probing, tasting the emotional signatures of the potential threats in front of it. Vex's crystalline form pulsed with carefully controlled energy as they calculated probability matrices. The adult will interpret any aggressive movement as a threat to its offspring. Survival probability if we run, 12%. Survival probability if we remain stationary, 18%. "Those are terrible odds either way," Wolf growled, his pack-hunting instincts screaming at him to either attack or flee, but his intelligence recognizing that both options led to getting very dead very quickly. The cub was less than 10 feet away now, its amber eyes fixed not on the group as a whole, but on one specific member. It had locked onto Dante with the kind of focused attention that suggested it had made some kind of decision. Every other cadet began backing away instinctively. Even their training couldn't override millions of years of evolutionary programming that screamed apex predator in languages older than speech. Every cadet except one. Dante didn't retreat. He didn't run. Instead, he did something that made absolutely no sense to anyone watching. He slowly extended his hand. What happened next defied everything the Galactic Defense Academy taught about interspecies contact, predator psychology, and basic survival instincts. The stalker cat cub, a creature genetically programmed to view every other species as either prey or threat, did something that made the watching cadets question the fundamental laws of nature. It climbed onto Dante's shoulder and began to purr. Not the warning rumble of a predator preparing to strike, or the territorial growl of a creature marking its space. This was the deep, thrumming contentment sound that Hondurian stalker cats reserved exclusively for their own pack members. The sound that xenobiologists had recorded exactly 3 times in the past century, always from hidden observation posts, always between blood relatives. Never between a stalker cat and an alien species. Never. That's impossible, Dr. Vex breathed, her skin cycling through colors that didn't have names in any known language. Stalker cats don't bond outside their species. They can't. Their neural architecture literally prevents cross-species empathic connections. The cub settled more comfortably against Dante's neck, its purring growing louder. Small claws that could shred combat armor extended just enough to grip his uniform without puncturing skin, as if the creature instinctively understood the difference between holding on and holding prey. Blix chittered in a frequency that indicated her compound brain was actively rejecting the sensory input. This violates 17 different biological principles. My queen mother would declare this an impossibility, even if she witnessed it directly. The probability matrices have collapsed, Vex announced, their crystalline form flickering with agitated light patterns. I cannot calculate odds for something that should not exist. Novan's reptilian features were locked in an expression of complete cognitive dissonance. His warrior culture had built their entire identity around the concept that strength dominated weakness, that predators consumed prey, that the natural order was sacred and immutable. Watching a human, a soft, weak prey species human, being adopted by an apex predator was breaking something fundamental in his worldview. Wolf's pack-hunting instincts were sending him conflicting signals that made his teeth ache. The scent markers were all wrong. The stalker cat should smell like aggression and territorial dominance. Instead, it reeked of contentment and pack-bonding behaviors that his species recognized but had never observed across genetic lines. Dante, he growled softly, what are you doing? I honestly have no idea, Dante admitted, slowly raising his other hand to gently scratch behind the cub's ears. The purring intensified to a level that was physically vibrating his ribcage. But it seems to be working. That was when the adult stalker cats emerged from the habitat. 3 of them padded into view with the fluid grace of living shadows. Each one was a masterpiece of evolutionary design, built for hunting and killing with an efficiency that made military engineers weep with envy. Their amber eyes tracked across the group of cadets with predatory intelligence, evaluating threat levels and calculating attack vectors. But they didn't attack. Instead, they did something infinitely more unsettling. They sat down and watched Dante with what could only be described as curiosity. "This is not how apex predators behave," Novin muttered, his voice pitched low enough that hopefully only the other cadets could hear him. "They should be ripping us apart to protect their offspring." The largest stalker cat, presumably the pack alpha, tilted its head in a gesture that was almost comically dog-like. Its psychic probes were active. Everyone could feel the light mental touch as it sampled their emotional states. But instead of projecting fear or aggression, it seemed to be investigating. Dr. Vex was frantically tapping notes into her datapad, her skin cycling through rapid color patterns that indicated extreme scientific excitement mixed with pure terror. The psychic resonance patterns are completely unprecedented. It's as if the human is broadcasting some kind of universal compatibility signal. "What does that mean?" Blix chittered nervously. "I have absolutely no idea," the doctor admitted. "This should not be possible according to every xenobiological model we have." The cub on Dante's shoulder shifted position, tiny claws gripping his uniform as it turned to face the approaching adults. Instead of the submissive posture expected from a juvenile in the presence of pack dominance, it made a small chirping sound that clearly indicated, "Look what I found." The adult stalker cats exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey an entire conversation. Then, in a display that would have sent every xenobiologist in the galaxy into cardiac arrest, they began to approach. Not stalking, not hunting. Approaching the way curious cats might investigate something interesting. "Nobody move," Dante said quietly, though he was beginning to suspect that the usual rules didn't apply here. I think they're just curious." The alpha reached him first, its massive head coming level with Dante's chest. This close, he could see the incredible detail in its amber eyes, the way its pupils contracted and dilated as it processed information that its species had never encountered before. Its psychic probe was stronger now, not invasive but thorough, like gentle fingers exploring the edges of his consciousness. Then it did something that made every cadet question their understanding of reality. It bumped its head against Dante's free hand in the universal gesture of a cat requesting attention. Dante, displaying either incredible courage or suicidal stupidity, began to pet an apex predator that could have disemboweled him with a casual swipe. The stalker cat's purr joined its offspring's, creating a harmonic resonance that seemed to vibrate through the preserve's superstructure. The sound was deep enough to feel in their bones, primal in a way that spoke to evolutionary memories older than civilization. The acoustic patterns suggest pack acceptance behaviors, Wolf observed, his own pack instincts helping him interpret what he was seeing. But extended to a non-pack member, this should be impossible. The other adult stalker cats approached more confidently now, clearly following their alpha's lead. One of them, slightly smaller but with distinctive silver markings, began investigating Blix with careful sniffs. The insectoid cadet froze completely, every evolutionary instinct screaming at her to play dead. But instead of aggression, the stalker cat simply seemed interested. It made soft questioning sounds, as if asking permission before carefully extending one massive paw to gently touch Blix's chitinous arm. "It's not trying to hurt me," Blix whispered in amazement. It's being gentle." The third stalker cat had focused its attention on Fex, its psychic abilities apparently fascinated by the crystalline being's unique energy patterns. It circled the energy form with scientific curiosity, occasionally making soft chirping sounds that seemed to be attempts at communication. "They're treating us like potential pack members," Wolf realized, his pack hunter background helping him recognize the behavioral patterns. but that's impossible. Stalker cats don't adopt outside their species. That was when the real impossibility began. Other creatures started emerging from the damaged habitats, not fleeing in panic, as would be expected when apex predators were loose, but approaching with the same curious interest the stalker cats had shown. A pair of Rigelian crystal serpents, their venomous fangs normally capable of killing most carbon-based life forms in seconds, slithered toward Dante with what could only be described as friendly intent. Their crystalline scales chimed softly as they moved, creating melody patterns that their species used for peaceful communication. Behind them came something that made Dr. Vex's datapad slip from nerveless fingers. A void dweller, one of the most dangerous organisms known to galactic science, drifted forward on impossible geometries. The creature existed partially outside normal space-time, feeding on quantum fluctuations and occasionally devouring entire starships that ventured too close to its hunting grounds. It was making sounds like cosmic wind chimes and somehow managing to look friendly. "This is beyond impossible," Dr. Vex stammered, her skin now flashing through every color in her species' emotional spectrum simultaneously. "These creatures can't coexist in the same space. Their territorial instincts, their dietary requirements, their base evolutionary programming, none of this should work." The crystal serpents reached Dante first, their melodious chiming growing more complex as they approached. Instead of striking with their deadly fangs, they began coiling around his arms in patterns that their species used to mark favored hunting partners. Their scales were warm to the touch, and their mental emanations broadcast contentment rather than aggression. The void dweller settled itself nearby, its impossible geometry folding space in ways that made the eye water. But instead of the reality-warping terror it usually projected, its presence felt comfortable. Like sitting next to a campfire on a cold night, if the campfire existed in 11 dimensions and occasionally hummed lullabies in mathematics. "They're all responding to something about the human," Fex observed, their analytical nature trying to process data that broke every known scientific model. "Some quality that we cannot detect, but that universally registers as non-threatening." More creatures emerged from the damaged containments. Acidic blob creatures that normally dissolved everything they touched were rolling toward Dante like friendly puppies, their corrosive secretions somehow neutralized in his presence. A pack of quantum wolves, predators that hunted by existing in multiple probability states simultaneously, materialized around the group and began playfully, nipping at each other instead of tearing reality apart to devour everything in sight. Even a juvenile Omega-class reality manipulator, a creature so dangerous that most species' first contact protocols involved immediate planetary evacuation, drifted over to investigate. Instead of rewriting local physics to suit its alien whims, it simply hovered nearby and made sounds like distant thunder mixed with whale songs. "It's like," Dante said slowly, trying to process what was happening as alien creatures that should have been trying to kill each other instead began what looked suspiciously like interspecies play behavior. "Like they're all friends?" The stalker cat cub on his shoulder chirped agreement, its tiny claws kneading his uniform in the universal cat gesture of contentment. Around them, the most dangerous collection of alien predators in known space had spontaneously formed what could only be described as the galaxy's most lethal petting zoo. "Commander Axon is going to have questions," Novan muttered, his reptilian worldview still struggling to process the impossibility in front of them. "Commander Axon is going to have a complete psychological breakdown," Wolf corrected, watching a creature that normally ate starships nuzzle against Dante's leg like an oversized extra-dimensional puppy. That was when the sound of running footsteps announced the arrival of Academy security, and everyone realized they were going to have to explain why the human cadet was hosting an interspecies peace summit in the middle of what should have been a catastrophic containment breach. This was going to be interesting. Commander Axon arrived expecting carnage, and instead found what looked like the galaxy's most dangerous daycare center. His crystalline features, normally arranged in expressions of military severity, went through approximately 15 different configurations of bewilderment as he processed the scene before him. Dante sat cross-legged on the preserve floor, the stalker cat cub still perched on his shoulder, while its purring parents lounged nearby like oversized house cats. The crystal serpents had wrapped themselves around his arms in decorative spirals, their scales chiming gentle melodies. The Void Dweller hovered overhead, its impossible geometry casting shadows that somehow felt protective rather than ominous. Even the reality manipulator had settled into a comfortable existence that wasn't actively rewriting local physics. "Cadet Dante," Commander Axon said slowly, his voice carrying the carefully controlled tone of someone trying very hard not to have a complete mental breakdown. "Would you care to explain why you appear to be hosting a tea party with the galaxy's most dangerous predators?" "Honestly, sir," Dante replied, gently scratching behind the stalker cat cub's ears while one of the crystal serpents nuzzled his wrist, "I'm not entirely sure. They just seem to like me." The security team that had followed Commander Axon into the preserve stood frozen at the entrance, their weapons drawn but completely useless in a situation that defied every tactical manual ever written. How do you establish a perimeter around friendly monsters? How do you classify a threat level for creatures that should be devouring everything in sight, but instead seem to be auditioning for a nature documentary about interspecies friendship? "The containment breach," Commander Axon said, his analytical mind trying to find solid ground in a situation that had abandoned all pretense of making sense. "What caused it?" Dr. Vex, who had been frantically documenting everything with the dedication of a scientist witnessing the impossible, looked up from her datapad. Her skin was cycling through colors that indicated she was experiencing every emotion her species was capable of, often simultaneously. "That's the thing, Commander," she said, her voice pitched with excitement and terror in equal measure. "There was no breach, not technically. The containment fields are still functional. The security protocols are still active. The creatures simply chose to leave their habitats." "Chose to leave?" Commander Axon's crystalline features arranged themselves into an expression that would have been skeptical if his species possessed eyebrows to raise. "These are apex predators, not house pets making lifestyle decisions." "Tell that to them," Wolf muttered, gesturing toward where the quantum wolves had formed a pack around Dante and were engaging in what could only be described as playful wrestling. Creatures that normally hunted by existing in multiple probability states simultaneously were playing tag across dimensional boundaries. That was when the real authority arrived. Director Havoc entered the preserve with the kind of presence that made gravitational fields nervous. The ancient being moved with the fluid grace of someone who had been old when most current civilizations were still trying to figure out fire. Their species didn't have a name that translated into standard galactic, but they had been observing and guiding galactic development for longer than recorded history. Where Commander Axon's arrival had been military precision, Director Havoc's entrance felt like the universe itself had decided to pay attention. "Ah," they said, their voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in frequencies beyond normal hearing. "So it begins." "Director?" Commander Axon straightened to attention, though his confusion was clearly visible in the way his crystalline form flickered. "Sir, I'm not sure what's happening here, but what's happening, Commander, is the emergence of something we've been watching for since humans first left their home world. Director Havik interrupted gently. Their ancient eyes, older than civilizations, focused on Dante, with an intensity that made the air itself seem to hold its breath. "I'm sorry," Dante said, carefully not disturbing the various creatures that had made themselves comfortable around him. "But watching for what, exactly?" Director Havik moved closer, their presence causing the various predators to become more alert, but not aggressive. Even the reality manipulator shifted its impossible geometry to acknowledge the ancient being's authority. "Tell me, Cadet Dante, what do you know about your species' evolutionary history?" "The basics, I suppose," Dante replied, wondering if this was some kind of test. "Descended from primates, developed agriculture, domesticated animals, built civilization, reached for the stars." "Domesticated animals," Director Havik repeated, as if those two words contained the secret to understanding the universe. "Your species is unique in that regard, almost unprecedented." The other cadets exchanged glances. Blix chittered softly. "My people have symbiotic relationships with other organisms, but we don't domesticate them in the human sense." "My pack hunts with other species occasionally," Wolf added, "but we don't bring them into our dens, don't make them part of our families." "And that," Director Havik said, their ancient voice carrying the weight of eons, "is what makes humanity extraordinary." They gestured toward the collection of creatures surrounding Dante, their movement causing reality to ripple slightly in ways that made the quantum wolves bark with what sounded like laughter. Every other species in the galaxy forms emotional bonds exclusively within their own genetic lines. They may cooperate with other species, form alliances, even develop technology together, but they don't form the deep, empathic connections that your species calls pack bonding across evolutionary boundaries. "Pack bonding?" Commander Axon asked, his military training struggling to categorize information that didn't fit into tactical parameters. "Humans," Director Havik explained, "are the only known species that naturally extends family-level emotional connections to other species. You don't just cooperate with other organisms, you adopt them. You make them part of your social groups. You form emotional attachments that transcend genetic compatibility." Dr. Vex's datapad nearly slipped from her grasp as the implications hit her. The dogs, the cats, all the earth animals that humans live with are not just domesticated, Director Havik confirmed. They are genuinely integrated into human social structures at a psychological level that no other species has achieved. Humans don't just use other animals. They love them. They grieve when they die. They consider them family members. The stalker cat cub on Dante's shoulder chirped softly, as if agreeing with the assessment. Its parents, massive predators that could shred battle armor, were watching the conversation with intelligent eyes that suggested they understood more than anyone had given them credit for. "But that's just normal," Dante protested. "Doesn't everyone feel that way about animals they live with?" "No," Vex said, quietly, their crystalline form pulsing with realization. "We don't. I can appreciate the mathematical beauty of biological forms. I can recognize their utility, but I don't form emotional attachments to non-crystalline entities. It never occurred to me that such attachments were possible." "My people respect the creatures we hunt," Novin added, his reptilian features showing signs of deep thought. "But we don't love them. We don't mourn them. We don't bring them into our homes and make them part of our families." "And therein lies humanity's gift to the galaxy," Director Havik said. their ancient presence seeming to expand until it filled the preserve. You are natural bridge builders, natural peacemakers. Your species unconsciously broadcasts an empathic resonance that other species recognize as non-threatening, even pack-compatible. The implications were staggering. Around them, creatures that should have been natural enemies were engaging in interspecies social behaviors that violated every known biological principle. This is why the containment breach wasn't a breach at all, Dr. Vex realized, her scientific mind racing through the possibilities. They sensed Dante's presence and were drawn to investigate. His empathic resonance overrode their territorial and predatory instincts. "But why?" Blix chittered, her compound eyes reflecting the preserve's lights in patterns that indicated deep confusion. What evolutionary advantage could such a trait provide? Director Havoc's ancient eyes focused on something beyond the immediate conversation, as if they were seeing patterns that played out across galactic timescales. "Because," they said slowly, "the galaxy is about to need peacemakers." The weight of that statement settled over the group like a physical presence. Even the various predators seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, their playful behaviors shifting to something more attentive. "The Convergence Wars," Commander Axon breathed, his crystalline features darkening as he processed the implications. "The intelligence reports about coalition building among the Outer Rim territories. 3 major power blocks are forming," Director Havoc confirmed. "The Silicon Syndicate, led by crystalline species who view biological life as chaotic and inefficient. The Bio-Supremacist Alliance, dominated by genetic purists who believe in species isolation and racial hierarchy. And the Hive Mind Collective, seeking to absorb all individual consciousness into unified groupthink entities." The preserve fell silent except for the gentle sounds of creatures that should have been mortal enemies grooming each other and sharing space with impossible harmony. "Each block believes their way of existence is superior," Director Havoc continued. "Each views the others as existential threats, and each has the military capacity to sterilize entire star systems in pursuit of their vision of galactic order." "But what does this have to do with humans?" Dante asked, though part of him was beginning to understand the answer. "Humans are the wild card," Director Havoc explained. "Your species doesn't fit into any of their ideological frameworks. You're not silicon-based, so the Syndicate can't dismiss you as biological chaos. You're not genetic purists, so the bio-supremacists can't claim you as allies. And you're aggressively individualistic, so the hive minds can't absorb you." "We're the species that doesn't make sense," Dante realized. "You're the species that makes all of their conflicts meaningless," Director Havoc corrected. "Your ability to form genuine emotional bonds across species lines, to create intergroup loyalty that transcends genetic compatibility. It's the one force that could unite the galaxy instead of dividing it." Around them, the impossible menagerie continued their peaceful coexistence. The stalker cats were teaching the quantum wolves pack-hunting techniques that worked across dimensional boundaries. The crystal serpents were harmonizing with the void dwellers' cosmic frequencies. The reality manipulator had begun creating small pocket dimensions where other creatures could play in customized environments. "This wasn't an accident," Commander Axon said, his military mind finally grasping the scope of what he was witnessing. "The containment breach, the field exercise, bringing Dante here, this was all orchestrated." Director Havoc's ancient features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. "We needed to confirm that the theoretical models were correct, that humans could indeed project their empathic resonance strongly enough to affect apex predators, that your species' pack-bonding abilities could override millions of years of evolutionary programming. A test, Blix chittered, understanding flooding her compound eyes. We were all part of a test. And you passed, Director Havok said, their gaze encompassing the entire group. All of you. Each species represented here has demonstrated the capacity for cooperation beyond your normal parameters when exposed to human empathic resonance. Dante felt the weight of galactic responsibility settling on his shoulders, though the stalker cat cub's presence made it somehow bearable. Around him, creatures that represented the galaxy's capacity for both destruction and wonder continued their impossible harmony. So, what happens now? He asked. Director Havok's ancient presence seemed to expand, encompassing possibilities that stretched across star systems and time itself. Now, they said, you get to choose. The galaxy is moving toward a war that could last millennia and cost billions of lives. Traditional diplomacy has failed. Military solutions will only create more conflict. But there is a third option. The empathic core, Commander Axon said, pieces of a larger puzzle falling into place. The rumors about a new branch of galactic service, operatives who specialize in interspecies psychology. Not just psychology, Director Havok corrected. True empathic bridging. Humans working with representatives from every major species group, creating genuine emotional connections that transcend political boundaries and biological differences. The stalker cat cub on Dante's shoulder chirped softly, its tiny claws kneading his uniform. Its parents, ancient predators with the power to kill armies, looked at him with eyes that reflected trust, loyalty, and something that transcended species entirely. The choice is yours, Cadet Dante, Director Havok said. You can return to standard military training, serve with distinction in conventional forces, and watch the galaxy tear itself apart. Or you can help us build something unprecedented, a force dedicated not to winning wars, but to making them unnecessary. Dante looked around at the impossible collection of creatures that had somehow formed a peaceful community around his mere presence. He thought about the choice between a galaxy at war and a galaxy at peace, between species that fought over differences and species that celebrated them. He thought about the stalker cat cub that had chosen him for reasons neither of them fully understood, and the trust it represented not just between individuals, but between entire ways of life. When do we start? He asked. The ancient being's smile seemed to encompass entire civilizations. We already have. Around them, the creatures that should have been enemies continued their impossible harmony, and for the first time in galactic history, peace felt like more than just the space between wars. It felt like something worth building. The stalker cat cub purred against his neck, and Dante realized that some bonds truly did transcend species, space, and the vast distances between stars. In the end, perhaps that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not the ability to fight, but the ability to love without boundaries, to extend family beyond genetics, and to see potential friends where others saw only aliens. The empathic core was born not in the halls of military academies or the chambers of galactic government, but in a damaged preserve where a human cadet chose to extend his hand to a creature that logic said should kill him. Sometimes the most important revolutions began not with warfare, but with trust. And sometimes the galaxy was saved not by the strongest warriors, but by those brave enough to make friends with monsters.